this month we are talking all about um, women in comedy, and I have a woman who has been a groundbreaker in comedy for each week to kind of be the Kickstarter or the focus for that week. And this week it's a comedian named Whoopi Goldberg. Raise your hand if you know who Whoopi Goldberg is, or you've seen Whoopi Goldberg on something before. Yeah, she's been around for a while, and she's on a television show, a daytime show called The View, um, and she was one of the voices in The Lion King, one of the voices of the hyenas in The Lion King, the original cartoon. She's in a really fun movie called Sister Act. Yes, Sister Act. Um, that's on. If you have Disney Plus, it's on it. It's on Disney Plus. It's a really fun movie. I liked that movie when I was a kid a lot. Yep, Scott. She was also on Star Trek for a while. So she's been around. She's been a formidable force in comedy for quite some time. But the thing that got her started was this one-woman show that she created back in the early 1980s, and it came out of her writing these characters that were based on people that she knew in her life growing up, and in her life that she was living in New York at the time. So she wrote this one woman show that was all of these characters, and they would do monologues and have little stories that would let you know about them. There's another great comedian named Lily Tomlin who did a similar thing, and another comedian named Gilda Radner. All three of those women had these kind of character-based one-woman shows, and I will let Whoopi Goldberg explain a little bit more about her show in this video so that you can see a little bit about what she was doing. Let me share my screen. So you saw one of the characters from that show, the Valley Girl, and then there's another character that was a little girl character. I just want to show you a little short clip of this one. Just to give you a little idea. And so there's like, I think 10 or 12 different characters that she does throughout the course of the show. And there's the little girl character, there's this older woman character, there's she plays people of different genders and people of different ages, and all of these different characters that have little monologues like that. And so the focus for today is to work on characters like that, work on characters that are based on things that you notice and things that you observe in real life, the people around you. So instead of trying to invent characters, you can craft characters that are inspired by the world around you. And the first aspect of that is observation, right? In order to collect your observations, I like to use what is called, what I call a waste book. That comes from a philosopher called George Christoph Lichtenberg. He had all of these waste books that he would write down these ideas for projects. And you probably have never heard of Lichtenberg before, and that's because he never really actually got any of his ideas off the ground. He was a huge procrastinator, but he would fill these waste books with things. And a lot of the really great creators and writers and artists of the time, they all thought he was the most brilliant and prolific person that they knew. But he's not the one that we remember, because he was such a procrastinator. He never got any of his ideas down. So so a waste book is just a little place where you can jot down ideas that you can come back to later. This is the one that I keep. I have tons of these. I have boxes of ones of these that have been filled up. But this is the one that I have now, and it fits in your pocket so that you can easily jot down ideas. I also like to use the ones that are unlined. I think that that is very helpful for a waste book, because it just kind of helps to free up your mind a little bit. It goes back to Gutenberg. Some of you might have learned about Gutenberg in school. Gutenberg invented the printing press. And once we had the printing press, then we started to have books that were printed in this very straight line, left to right format. And that's when we started to write and think in that sort of linear format as well. As opposed to, if you take a look at the notebooks of, say, Leonardo da Vinci, the Renaissance artist who predates the printing press and Gutenberg. Look how you see in his notebooks there, first of all, there's no lines, and sometimes there's a drawing and then there's text that goes up the side of the page, and sometimes there's writing that goes around a drawing. And you have drawings in the middle of the page, you have drawings in the corner, you have text and drawings overlapping with each other. And that's really the way people thought and created pre-printing press. So Mr. Gutenberg, he gave us a lot of good things with the printing press, but it also made our thinking very linear. So I encourage you to break out of that mold and have the lines off of your paper in your notebook so that you can create all over the place. But for your waste book, when you're trying to create characters, you jot down things that you notice about people that are interesting. You can jot down little clips of conversation that you hear. You can write down little observations or thoughts that you have about, ooh, that would be a good idea. This is a good idea. And you can also, in addition to writing down things, you can also make little sketches. And the reason I bring that up is because Chuck Jones used to do that. I wanted to show you some of what I was talking about, but my copies of Chuck Amok and Chuck Redux, I think, have gotten packed away. I think I mentioned that my wife and I are moving from Washington, D.C. to California at the end of this month. And so some of my things have ended up in boxes already. So I couldn't find the book, but if you have access to a copy of Chuck Amok, or if next time you're in Ben's class, I know Ben has a copy of it, you can ask him to show you some of these drawings where Chuck would draw pictures of people in his life, a school teacher or a friend of the family, and he would just make little sketches of these characters, and then later on they would show up as characters in his work. And Chuck really believed in keeping these little notebooks for future ideas and carrying it with you all the time and making drawings all the time, because he mentions in Chuck Amok that when you take a photograph of something, especially, we all have these little cameras that we carry around with us all the time, and you see something cool and you go, okay, boom, click, I've got a picture of it, and I put it away, and then I forget about it because I have that picture. But when you see something interesting, whether it's a person that could be a fun character, or an interesting scene, or an interesting animal, or whatever it is, if you take the time to sit and sketch, not only does it put into your brain what that is, and it gives you a thing to look back at and refresh your memory of what it is. But when you're drawing something, unlike with a photograph where you go click and it's done, when you draw something, you really have to take notice of it. You really have to observe it and really make little notices of details that you might not necessarily do if you just snap a photograph real fast. So it helps you to hold it into your memory a little better because you really have to pay attention to it. I always like that about that idea of Chuck's. I've read that when I was in high school, I think, and I've always kept that in mind. So instead of snapping a photograph of something, try to really pay attention to it, and if you can, even make a little sketch of it. And in that way, there's a character that was being observed by the author Mark Twain. Some of you may have heard of Mark Twain before. He was a humorous writer in the 1800s, middle 1800s. He was one of America's preeminent writers and America's preeminent comedians, actually. He was the person who is sort of credited with creating the idea of stand-up comedy, because he would write these humorous stories and then go around and tour and perform and tell these humorous stories. And the top humor prize in the United States for the best comedians every year, they give out what is known as the Mark Twain Award, and that's the number one. That's like the number one honor you can get as a comedian in the United States. So Mark Twain brings a lot to comedy, but there's a story that or a little excerpt from a story I'm going to play. The book is called Roughing It. And this is just him sitting out observing something and taking notes about this particular character. And I want to see if you can pick up on why I might be sharing this particular character. This is going to be just audio, so just you'll just listen for this. I'm going to turn my camera off just so that you're not staring at me listening to an audio file. Share the sound. And all right, so this is, again, this is an excerpt from a story called Roughing It by Mark Twain, and see if you can recognize why I might share this story. All right. Does that description that Mark Twain lays out for us, does that sound like anything that we've talked about before? Yes, Rosebrick Studios.
So I'm pretty sure that that's what based Chuck Jones on creating the Wile E. Coyote.
That is exactly correct. And Jay got it as well. Yes. So Chuck Jones was a huge Mark Twain fan, and this little excerpt from Roughing It is what inspired Chuck Jones to create the Wile E. Coyote. And if you listen to that description, you can hear, you can almost picture Wile E. Coyote in your mind. And it's really fascinating. A few years ago, or not a few years ago, many years ago at this point, there was a special exhibit that they had at the Motion Picture Academy in Los Angeles. And it was all about the work of Chuck Jones. And one of the things that they had was Chuck's actual copy of Roughing It turned to this section of the book, and all of his notes and scribbles that were in the margins and things, where he was getting inspired to create the Wile E. Coyote. So again, these descriptions of things that we're seeing in everyday life Mark Twain was just sitting there, having breakfast and observing the prairie, and notices this coyote, writes this description, and then almost 100 years later, Chuck Jones gets inspired by it to create um, this character that is beloved and last. Again, I bring him up all the time. He's my favorite clown, Wile E. Coyote. So yeah, so just this little act of making an observation and jotting it down, as I've said, could become something that's this really fun, amazing character. And so now it's time for us to work on some characters a little bit. So I have this sheet that I think is valuable, and I'll put it up on my screen. This is this came from a book on playwriting that I got a long time ago when I was a freshman in college, and I'll share this with you so that you can see it. And hopefully we can work on developing some characters together. So this is just kind of a rundown of all the different things that might influence what a character is and how they act, and fleshing out these details help to give you a really unique and well-defined character. So for example, the characters that Whoopi Goldberg portrayed, they're not sort of broad caricatures the way that when we talk about stock characters, and when we talk about the commedia dell'arte and the stock characters that we've talked about before, those characters are very well defined. They have these very individual personalities, and they're very unique. And likewise with the description of the coyote, it's you could say, oh, he looks kind of like a dog and it's brownish gray. Like, you could give a very general description, but Mark Twain goes on and on and on for paragraphs about this coyote that he sees wandering across the prairie. So capturing as much detail as possible and being specific with the characters can give you these really defined characters. And what's fascinating is the more specific that you are, the more universal you become. And George Lucas, who created the Star Wars universe, is the person that said that the more specific that you are, the more universal you become. So even though you might have a character that's very, very specific, people can see themselves in those characters. And so I thought we would take a look at this, and you can either do this for a character that's one of the ones that you draw on a regular basis. If you have a character that's one of your, I know several of you have characters that are just in your arsenal ready to go. So if you wanted to fill out some of the information here, and you don't have to fill out every part of this because maybe it's not important to your character. Maybe if your character is upper, lower, middle class, isn't really important to the world of the character, that's fine. You don't have to fill out all of it, but knowing the specificity of it, as much of it that is important, is good. So you can, that's option one. You can write out the characters that you already work on, or you can also work on a character that is someone in your life. So like the Whoopi Goldberg characters. So if there's a person, like maybe your grandma is a really interesting character that you wanted to craft, or maybe your dad has a really interesting, bizarre friend, or the lady that cuts your hair, whatever it might be. just taking these characters from your real life and developing them into a character. And you can, if you want, you can also draw the character. So whether it's a person from your real life or the character that you do on a regular basis, if you want to go full Da Vinci's Notebook on it and draw the character and then write the answers to these questions around, you can do that. So I wanted to give you all some time to work on developing these characters, and just kind of really crafting a well-developed character using specificity. So let's see. I'll put, let me see, I'll put this in the chat, I think, and maybe that way we can still see everybody. So here's that one. And this one. And this one. There we go. And again, you don't have to know all of this, but as specific as you can be, the more well-defined the character is. And you can describe your character in list form like this. You can draw the character and do Da Vinci's Notebook style right around the character. But we'll take a few minutes to take a look at them. If any time along the way, if anybody has something that they want to share, just raise your hand. You can share either in the chat or you can share by turning on your microphone. I know just from seeing some of the drawings of the characters that you all create, I've seen some really interesting specific characters. So I'm curious if you have already thought about some of these things for your characters. If your characters have backstories or anything like that. This is also helpful. I know that you're creating a comic book for the month with the art classes. So developing a character this way might help you to figure out. Center of weight. That's where that's kind of where you hold your weight, where you carry your weight from. So someone who their center of weight might be very low and they have a very low center of weight, or they might be, I'm having trouble doing it with my headphones. Here, let me take this off for a second. So your center of weight might be in your shoulders, where it's like, ugh, and your shoulders kind of like lead everything that you do. Or some people might have a very chesty center of weight, and then everything is kind of led by the chest, or low down in your tummy, kind of a chubby guy like me, center of weight. You can really put your center of weight anywhere. If a character has a tail, it could be in the tail, and it could be a like low grounded center of weight, or it can be in your nose. Even like your center of weight could just be like, oh, everything's kind of led by the nose. Let me see. Does that make sense, Tater? Yes, it is a huge list for sure. But and like I said, you don't have to know the answer to all of them. But if the more that you can kind of flesh out, it also makes it easier when you're writing stories to know the characters this well, because um, it makes it easy to put them into situations because you know how they're going to react, right? Like we have, going back to the coyote again, we've talked about how Chuck had this list of rules of all of these things that are and are not allowed to happen in a Roadrunner cartoon, and you think that that might be restricting creatively, but sometimes putting boundaries on uh, on your creativity helps you to be more creative, right? Like for example, if I said, um, draw anything, draw anything you want, just draw for the next 5 minutes, you might be a little stifled and go, what do I draw? Do I draw a character? Do I draw a scene? Do I draw something abstract? Do I draw a bunch of shapes? What am I drawing? But if I say, you know, draw a picture of the room that you're in right now. Well, let's put a restriction on it. Let's put a boundary on it, but it's helped to focus your creativity a little bit. So um, these knowing this stuff is really helpful, because that kind of um, gives you a focus for this character, and it helps you to understand the character and know how they'll behave when you put them into situations. We know how Coyote is going to behave when we put him into a situation. We know how Daffy Duck is going to behave in any given situation, right? You don't have a defined age for the character. That's okay. 20 to 25-ish is still, it gives you even though it's not a specific age, it gives you a specific age range, right? At least we know that the character isn't an old person and it's not a little kid. Um, they're not middle aged. 20 to 25-ish is fine. Like, we don't know exactly how old Bugs Bunny is. I mean, we know in terms of like the first cartoon, but the character of Bugs Bunny, um, he seems to be like a 35 to 45-year-old, uh, Brooklyn Flatbush, uh, fast talking comedian type. So we'll take a couple more minutes if you guys continue to work, and then hopefully you'll have some stuff to share. When you do, just raise your hand. Yes, you can do that, Jay. The other thing I'll point out or just share with you while you're working, I couldn't find my Chuck Jones books, but I did see this book, and I thought, oh, this will be worth sharing with everyone. Um, this is a graphic, it's not really a graphic novel, it's like a graphic collection. It's a collection of stories that are told in graphic novel form. But it's called Trickster. And the figure of Coyote, since we were talking about Mark Twain's version of Coyote and Chuck Jones's version of Coyote. Oh, Tino has the book. That's fantastic. Yeah, it's a really great book. Trickster is a sort of old version of a clown character, and it's actually the trickster version of clown is actually the version of clown that I teach the most at the clown school in Los Angeles. I teach several classes on the trickster archetype, and in North America there are four major trickster characters. There's in the northwest there's the raven, and in the northeast there's the raccoon, and then in the southeast there's the rabbit, and in the southwest is Coyote, and Coyote is a trickster. He's a clown god to a lot of the indigenous people in the southwest. And so there's this book is it's all indigenous storytellers that are telling these trickster stories. Yes, Anansi the spider is also that's another one that comes out of the Caribbean and is down in the southeast some as well. Anansi the spider, that is definitely one of our trickster figures in North America as well. But so this, what I was saying is this book is a collection of trickster stories all told by indigenous storytellers, and each story is illustrated by a different artist. And so it's really neat because there's all kinds of different styles in here. But one of my favorites is this. It's actually the first one. It's called Coyote and the Pebbles, and it's all about Coyote getting into trouble and messing up the other animals are trying to draw constellations of themselves in the sky, and Coyote ends up coming along and messing it all up for them. So even the trickster version of Coyote, the version of Coyote that's been around for thousands of years, people telling stories about it, is also very similar to Wile E. Coyote. So if you have a chance to check out this book, either at the library or on Amazon, I think a lot of, especially because you are all interested in art, lots of different artistic styles in this book that I think that you guys would appreciate. Okay, does anybody have anything they want to share so far? You can share a work in progress. It doesn't have to be completely finished. All right, Jay, appreciate it. Did anyone do a drawing that they want to share? You can share in progress as well, like I said.
Jay?
Hello. So this is my character that I'm gonna do for my comic.
Hold on a second, let me there make your picture big. Oh, very cool. Excellent. And I like that you've got a couple of different versions there, and that is down in the those are different pride flags. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was wondering what those colored stripes were, but then I realized what the colors were. Very cool. Excellent.
Thank you.
All right, anybody else? No one has anything to share. They just like, you just really like hearing me talk to my computer screen, I guess.
Here's Liliana and Heather Rose.
Fantastic, thank you. Thank you for sharing.
So we're actually writing the personality elsewhere, but here's a drawing of my character. Hey, where's mine?
Oh, very cool. Excellent. What is that you have written there? Is that something they're saying, or is that just a description of them?
I was just writing a few details.
Okay. Very cool. Is this Is this a character that you draw often, or is this something that you were just inventing as we were doing this project?
Just inventing.
Fantastic, excellent. Is there anything that you can tell us about this character?
Well, he's from England, but he's from the more medieval times.
Very cool.
He's with like 2 other kids, and they're trying to fight off monsters.
It's like a alternate world, but
Oh, cool. Oh, so these are the 2 characters that go with the other character.
uh-huh.
Excellent. And what are those 2 characters? Can you do they have names? Do any of them have names?
Yes. Their names are Tobin and Petra.
Tobin and Petra. Very cool. Excellent. I that sounds like a story that I would definitely be interested in seeing. Three kids in the Middle Ages fighting off monsters in an alternative world. Yeah, I'm in. Sign me up. Let me know when it's going to be on television. Half a million years. Whoa. All right. Anybody else have either a drawing or a description that they want to share? Oh, I see. Jay's put the info in the character on the character in the chat. Jay, this is the character that you showed us. This is the. Am I correct? It's not a different character, right? Okay, cool. Excellent. Occupation, college student. That's a great occupation. Do that as long as parents will pay for it. I like that. Passive aggressive leader type. Oh, yeah. It's interesting. I know some folks like that. Very cool. So Liliana, Heather Rose, Jay, or anyone who wants to answer this question, are these, when you come up with these characters, are they characters that are inspired by anything? Are they inspired by anybody you know, or maybe other characters that you've read about, or are they just characters that just boom, they pop into your imagination and you just gotta flesh them out? Let's see what we have. Excellent. Thanks for sharing that, Jay. Let me scroll back up here and see Tater's stuff. Well, Tater, don't apologize for writing too much. That's the whole point. So let's see, character, slim, athletic, dark blue. Oh, interesting. Very interesting colored eyes. Gravelly German accent. Speaks more formally, menacing, chilling, like a villain. He's alone, tired, drinks too much coffee. Ooh, very good. So, Tater, would you say, is this character a villain or more like an anti-hero? It seems like a kind of darker character. I'm wondering if they're supposed to be a bad guy, or if they're just kind of an anti-hero that we kind of root for, even though they have a little bit of an edge to them.
Anti-hero. They aren't really against anyone specifically. They will help if it's required and if you can pay for it, but yeah.
Very cool. I like those kinds of characters. There's a French character called Monsieur Lupin, who is a gentleman thief that I really like. Is a very similar character to this. There's also they call them hard-boiled detective novels. Characters like Sam Spade and who else? Philip Marlowe. Really, a style of the book style is called hard-boiled detective novels, and that got translated into a film style called film noir. It was really popular in the 1940s and 50s. I really dig those kinds of dark, edgy, anti-hero characters, so that's a lot of fun. All right, well, if nobody else has anything that they want to share, we've reached the end of class time for today. But thank you all so much for sharing these characters. This is fantastic. I think these are all super creative. And I like that you've all put so much thought into your characters and you're getting very specific. Freddie, yes, you want to share? Go for it.
Okay, one, I'm an imposter. I am not Freddy. I am nobody. Also, I've been doing a tiny bit more on my game. I just did a rough logo. It's nothing that much.
Very cool. I like that. Thank you for sharing. Also, thanks to everyone who shared work. It's I know it can be a scary thing to share something personal and that you've created. So anytime you guys share things, I'm very appreciative of your sharing your creativity with us. So yeah, so that's it for today. We've covered Whoopi Goldberg and her character creation style. We've covered waste books and observation and how we can turn observations from everyday life into really interesting characters. And then we've talked about specificity in character and really developing unique and specific characters, not just broad stock characters. So thanks everybody for working today. Next week, we're going to be talking about one of my favorite comedians, Carol Burnett, a sketch comedy performer from the mostly got started in the 1970s, but has been around forever and ever and ever. Really brilliant and funny comedian. But a lot of her work centers around really interesting costumes and really interesting props. And so we're going to look at building environments and costumes for characters that can have a comic element to them next week. So we'll be doing some design stuff next week that I think will be fun. So yeah, that'll be great. And we'll see you then and have a good week. Don't forget to visit the donation page. Thanks for coming. We'll see you all next week. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Mike. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.